can jump on as they do. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this free webinar on breaking the cycle of addiction. My name's Ari Rogers, Senior Coach here at Coachology. Warm welcome to you, Ian Matthew. Thanks for joining us this evening. And if you are catching this recording on our YouTube, a warm welcome to you guys as well. So breaking the cycle of addiction, it is a little bit of a sensitive topic, and there is a little bit of reason behind why we decided to run this webinar. So there is often this preconceived notion that comes to mind when people who struggle with addiction, and that is often in the form of, or images that do come up, images such as dirty needles, homelessness, crime, when the truth is that addiction actually does not discriminate. It manifests its way in so many diverse ways, and it impacts countless lives globally. So why don't we jump on in there? Let me get rid of that. So a little bit about me, guys. My name's Ari Rogers, Senior Coach here at Coachology. I am a certified NLP coach and ICF coach holding an ACC credential. I also am a certified addictions-informed mental health professional, as well as a clinical trauma professional. I hold professional certifications in cognitive behavioral therapy and dialectical behavioral therapy as well. Previous to working at Coachology, I actually used to work in residential treatment centers here in Thailand. Part of my scope there was working with individuals on creating and implementing recovery plans that they could implement as soon as they left treatment, as also helping them process difficult or uncomfortable emotions, and at times having to intervene when someone wanted to leave treatment. Throughout my time working in treatment, I worked with over 200 different individuals. And since I left working in treatment, I have carried on working in the treatment field, working as a one-on-one recovery coach, primarily working around creating recovery plans and helping individuals reach and implement those plans so that they can not only have some form of recovery and limit their addictive behaviors, but also form some kind of goals and outcomes that they would like to specifically achieve in life. So a little bit about Coachology. We are a coaching and training provider based in Bangkok. We actually specialize in leadership development, creating coaching cultures, certifying professional coaches, and also implementing psychological safe environments. These are just some of the companies that we have worked with here in Asia and also in Thailand. If anyone catching this recording is interested in some kind of in-house corporate training, please feel free to reach out to us. We have an awesome team of facilitators that would be very happily love to come into your environment and help out with whatever outcomes you would like to achieve. So it looks like it is just me and you, Ian, on this webinar tonight, and thank you for joining. So please feel free to utilize the chat box if you have any questions or comments or anything that you would like to share throughout the webinar. What we will be covering today is what is addiction, characteristics of addiction, the brain reward system, specific dopamine pathways within the brain and the nervous system, the addiction cycle, different forms of addiction, and much, much more. So the first topic then I guess we should uncover is what actually is addiction. And, as the years have progressed and in the past, as new research is coming out about this, there is a lot of differences in what addiction is. And I'm not here to say what is right or what is wrong. And I guarantee you in the future, there will be different definitions of what addiction actually is. Here at Coachology, we like to describe addiction as a treatable and chronic chemical imbalance involving complex interactions among the brain circuits. Factors include genetics, the environment, an individual's life experience, and people with addiction use substances and or engage in behaviors that become compulsive and often continue despite harmful consequences. So in other words, addiction is unwanted and unconscious automatic behavior, meaning that the individual doesn't want the particular behavior. The fact that it's gone on for so long, it becomes an unconscious program, and it becomes automatic. And eventually it does become some form of response to a particular trigger or stimulus. Yes, Matthew, we do have some links where you can research the creation of simple psychological safety environments. I will share those with you via email to you. Cool. So the next one is key characteristics of addiction. Addiction is chronic, it's progressive, and it is fatal. So over time, as addiction progresses, especially with substance use or any form of mind or mood altering substance, that will progress into something a lot heavier and eventually lead to fatality if not intervened or some form of treatment is involved. There is a certain element of obsession, especially when the individual is not acting out on that behavior. When there is periods of abstinence or they're not doing it, they're constantly thinking about wanting to engage in the behavior. And the element of compulsion, the fact that even though they understand that there are consequences from the behavior, they will continue to act out. This is an interesting one. Unable to deal with life on life's terms. You know, life has its ups and downs, right? And what goes up comes down, what goes down comes up. And life on life's terms, we're specifically talking about significant negative events, such as the loss of a family member, perhaps losing a job, running into some form of debt, or, you know, COVID, a recent one. That is a particular unexpected event, and that inability to deal with that is another key characteristic of addiction. Constantly being trapped in this false illusion of what if only, and just one more time. What if I did that? If only I did this, perhaps I won't do that, or this is just the last time that I'm going to use. Good evening, Adrian. Nice to see you. Warm welcome. Nice Watford shirt you're wearing there.
Evening, Harry.
Cool. We're just going through the key characteristics of addiction. And there's an element of justification of the behavior, as well as they continue to act out despite the negative consequences. And just going to check the chat box here. Sorry, Ian. I've been calling you Matthew. I do apologize. Cool. So the brain reward system. I mean, you know, as it looks, pretty self-explanatory. We have a brain, and in the brain we have some form of reward system. On a little bit of a deeper level, there are a group of structures that are activated whenever we experience some kind of reward or pleasure. Just take note of this one now, and we're going to talk about it further along. The system is found along the primary dopamine pathways of the brain. And dopamine is mostly produced in what we call the ventral tegmental area, or the VTA. So if I was to take my hand here and draw an imaginary line halfway down my face, and then a line going this way, where those lines interact is where you will find the VTA. So dopamine, interesting name. And dopamine is actually a neurotransmitter within our body, and it has this effect of giving pleasure. For me, or has anyone had that feeling of when you've eaten something you really enjoy after a hard day's work, and you've got that really nice feeling, that pleasurable feeling, that is dopamine kicking in. It's that feel good feeling. and ultimately certain behaviors trigger the release of dopamine. So within the dopamine pathways, there are actually four main pathways. Dopamine is transported to other areas of the brain through these pathways. For this webinar and focusing primarily on addiction, we will be focusing on the mesolimbic system. So if I take my mouse here and I just circle that, the yellow and the red parts is where the VTA is, bang in the middle of midbrain. And here is a enlarged version of that. So the VTA, this is where dopamine is activated whenever we experience something rewarding, whether it's going out for having a nice meal. What else is rewarding? For me, I really enjoy fishing, and after a hard days of fishing, when I haven't caught anything, that feeling of catching a fish is a rewarding sensation for me. Once the dopamine is released, this is then projected to an area over here, which we call the nucleus accumbens. And that is strongly associated with motivation and reward. Within that systems, there are complex circuits involving the amygdala and the hippocampus, which is what we call the front section of the brain. As soon as that area lights up with dopamine, the activation of this area tells us to repeat whatever we just did to feel the rewarding sensation. And due to the circuits connected to the amygdala and hippocampus, you then have feelings that are attached to that behavior, and then memory attached to that behavior. So you can see once this cycle gets started, and because the dopamines move through from the midbrain into the front area, there's feeling and there's memory attached as well. Cool. All right. So here's a little breakdown, I guess, of a smaller example of that. Let's call this gentleman here Larry. Larry's had a particularly stressful day at work. Stress is a trigger for him. Perhaps he has a boss, or he's just not enjoying it anymore. Larry decides that when he gets home from work, he's going to reward himself by having a pint of lager, a pint of ale, you name it. Larry is going to go straight to that as a reward. What happens then, as the dopamine is being released into the brain, it activates it, and the brain's pathways work together to encourage the repetition of that rewarding behavior. Once that habit starts to form and they cross what's called the invisible line into addiction, you end up getting into this cycle. So I'll break that down again. Larry's feeling stressed at work. He goes home, he has a pint, the dopamine kicks in, the brain's pathways work together. Because of that movement into the hippocampus and amygdala, repetition they work together to encourage repetition, and then we have feelings and memory attached to that particular behavior. This isn't yet the addiction cycle. We're going to be covering that a little bit further on. This is more just to highlight how the brain pathways work and the reward system that goes with it. So how does this all fit in with addiction? Interesting. Well, addiction develops when the pathways in the brain get overwhelmed. So we have our natural response to dopamine, which is when we experience something, where over time that behavior develops, the pathways in the brain get overwhelmed because of the higher releases of dopamine. When a person develops an addiction to any particular kind of addictive behavior, the brain starts to change. And instead of a simple pleasurable surge of dopamine, the natural response, addictive behaviors flood the system. And I'm especially talking about mood and mind altering substances or any kind of substance abuse. This can happen at sometimes 10 times more than the natural reward. So let's say, for example, Larry gets home from work and has from a particular stressful day. He decides that he wants to have a nice meal. He will have that dopamine release. let's say he decides instead of having that meal, he wants to have some kind of, sorry, I'm just going to mute everyone here. He wants to engage perhaps in some kind of stimulant like cocaine or methamphetamine. That will then flood the system 10 times more than the natural reward. The brain remembers this surge and it associates it with the addictive behavior. Over time, as the addiction develops, the circuits adapt and become less sensitive. That person will eventually build up some kind of tolerance to the substance or the addictive behavior. And achieving that exact sensation becomes important. So let's say Larry, the first time he's gone through that process of feeling stressed and decides he wants to have a beer, you'll have a flood of dopamine. Over time, that dopamine will decrease as he continues to engage in that behavior. And what we have is some form of insanity starting to kick in. He's trying to replicate achieving that original rush by doing the same thing over and over again, but he's getting some form of different result. Let me just check the chat box here, guys. Hi, Dr. Dinesh. Wonderful to have you here. Thank you so much for joining, and hope you enjoyed the workshop the other day. So, guys, this here is a little video. It's about 4 minutes long. A little bit of a pre-frame. This video is going to highlight the addiction cycle to some degree. You'll see elements of a bird going through the process. Over time, what happens, tolerance builds up and they eventually still taking the same amount, but they are not getting that same rush. And you'll see the negative consequences that can come with that, such as antisocial behavior and different other character defects. Let me just play it here. Can you guys hear that sound okay? Cool. All right. Oh, sorry, guys. guys. So what did you guys observe in that video? Feel free to type into the chat box what you guys saw and what you observed. And I will read them out as they are coming through. Whilst you're doing that, so what I observed from that was, there was an individual, let's call him Kiwi, since he looked like a Kiwi. And he was walking along. He had perhaps he had some kind of division within him, or there was some kind of wounding or damage. He walked by and he noticed this golden nugget, right? And when I'm talking about the golden nugget, it's not just substances, right? It could be behavioral addictions such as gambling, shopping, food, emotional addiction, or thought addiction. And he picked it up. He had a rush, and it seemed like everything that he experienced just went away. And we have one answer in here. Yeah, Ian, a progressive buildup of craving and development of dysfunctional behavior. Yes, wonderful. Spot on. So basically what Kiwi got himself into, and there's one more chat coming through from Adrian, the rush of the substance, and then a quickening of the rush, then rushing to get the next fix. Exactly. And what we saw from that video is what we actually call the addiction cycle. So Kiwi was walking by, obviously once with some kind of pain or suffering within him. He had an initial use, and he got a high, or that dopamine was released, and all of those worries just went away. He carried on, he kept on going through, and eventually, as he got through it, he started to abuse that golden nugget. Over time, that builds up to tolerance, and we saw his high get lower and his lows get even deeper. Eventually, he became dependent on it and into full-blown addiction. A couple more chats coming through. Perseverance and constancy. Yes, Dr. Dinesh and Adrian, I was waiting for him to be like Daffy Duck with his bill sticking in the ground. That could potentially happen. So the cycle actually doesn't stop there, and we call it a cycle because it loops around. So once someone's become aware of their addiction and they've done something about it and they've entered a phase of recovery from the addictive behavior, if they don't stay with that plan, it could lead to a relapse, and a relapse being the ending of a period of abstinence. And the relapse usually ends after the person has engaged in the behavior. The relapse starts when they start deviating away from the recovery plan. And then once the relapse has happened, it goes back into an initial use. And over some time working with some people, I have seen people come into recovery. After periods of a certain amount of recovery time, they have gone back into that initial use. Their body, they still have this idea that they can use the same amount as they did when they stopped using. And unfortunately, that can lead into things such as an overdose or some kind of other unfortunate event. So that is the addiction cycle. We are going to be talking a little bit more in the webinar on how to break it and when to break it, and some practical tools that we can implement to overcome it. So how the cycle starts. So it's this inability to cope with life on life's terms. It's unable to deal with a particular event, and in return, we respond by acting out on a behavior. Life on life's terms. These could be instances such as financial issues, professional issues, emotional issues, relationship, or even family issues. It could also be trauma, some kind of childhood trauma, some PTSD, or any kind of trauma that was developed throughout the individual's life. Unresolved trauma I'm talking about here, guys. And these burdens produce stress, they produce anxiety, resentment, anger, and fear. With the inability to cope with that particular event, people turn to an addictive behavior in a response or a reaction to provide a quick and bearable solution to whatever is going on for them. In other words, when someone wants to feel better and alleviate any form of suffering, is how it starts. Apologies about the typo there at the bottom. So that's how the cycle starts, right? We have some kind of suffering going on. The person's unable to deal with it, and they find some kind of quick relief in an addictive behavior. Yeah, this is powerful. Making a habit out of this coping mechanism, it impacts the brain and its reward systems, which is essentially the chemical imbalance that addiction is. So we have what is called the addiction tree. I'm sure some of you who are in the field of addiction are familiar with this. And when I say that research has come out, this is what new research is showing. At the bottom here, the root of the tree, we have the root of addiction. It's the underlying damage of shame or wounding or division within that individual, whether it's unresolved trauma, the inability to process an event that's happened. That is the root cause of addiction. From there, the addiction tree forms. And the first addiction, which is probably the most common one, is substance addiction. When I say common, common in the fact that it's common to what people think when people talk about addiction. These can include things such as illicit and prescription drugs, alcohol, food, caffeine, or nicotine, or any mood or mind altering substance. The next one is people addictions. Addictions in relationships, sex and love, codependency, and power within a relationship. And you can also be addicted to your thoughts, whether it's rigid thinking, fantasy, repetition of a particular event over and over again, or some form of perfectionism. And guys, these are just some examples. It's not the full-blown spectrum of substance addictions, people addictions, or thought addictions. The next one here is activity addictions or process addictions, as they're known. These can include things such as shopping, exercise, gambling, which is a very, very big one that I've noticed here in Southeast Asia, crime, and also work. And did you know you can also be addicted to emotions, whether it's anger, rage, hate, guilt, fear, envy, or grief? I'm just going to go to the chat box here, have something incoming. Where does social media fit into the tree? That would be a process addiction, the behavioral addiction of wanting to find some kind of relief on social media. So activity addictions, Adrian, on this side here. So what we can see from this diagram, that addiction manifests in so many ways. This chemical imbalance that happens are just symptoms of this underlying wound, damage, or shame, or particular division, and it doesn't really matter what the addiction is. Someone could be addicted to substances. At the same time, their addiction could play out in the form of process or activity addictions. Someone could be addicted to emotions, and it can manifest in the form of people addictions. And the root cause of that is this root and underlying shame, which leads us on to our next slide, which is a really, really powerful quote from 𝘄𝗵𝒴𝒂𝒊𝒄𝒕𝒊𝒐𝒏, and it's not why the addiction, but why the pain. And when you can deal with that pain, addiction does not manifest in the way it does. So it's not really, it's the root cause is the pain, and the addiction is the symptom of that pain that's coming through. And this is all new research that's coming out, guys. You know, previously it was seen that addiction was an incurable disease. This is new research saying they can treat that initial pain. Addiction does not manifest into what it is. Cool. So some tips for breaking the cycle. Step number one is to become aware of the addictive behavior. Some form of awareness, whether that can be in the form of self-awareness, or you may need to utilize someone such as an interventionist, a recovery coach, or a counselor to help bring out that awareness of the addictive behavior. Without that awareness, you cannot intercept that cycle. Think of it like someone who is stuck up in an automatic program of addiction. They are unconsciously aware at times of what they are doing. You can't bring a horse and make it drink to water and make it drink. So there needs to be some form of self-awareness within the individual. And the next thing is to acknowledge the situation as it is. And a key word there is neutrally. There's no right or wrong. There's no moral dilemma going on. There's just a neutral acknowledgement of a current situation or challenge that needs some form of addressing. The next step is to choose a healthy environment and become consciously aware of what triggers that particular addictive behavior. And yeah, awareness of the trigger, statistically and scientifically, has been shown that it will reduce response to that trigger by 50%. You could utilize support groups such as 12-step recovery groups, refuge recovery, which is very big here in Thailand, and a non-spiritual aspect, smart recovery as well. And the beauty of these support groups is that, you know, it is a community of support around you, and it's the identification of the challenge and the recovery together that ultimately makes it work. You could engage with a recovery coach or an NLP coach to help you create and implement some kind of recovery plan. You could use specific NLP tools to help process some of the trauma and suffering that is going on with the individual. This is a big one, to create a daily recovery plan that minimizes your triggers that instigate the addictive behavior. And this could incorporate into your recovery plan, and that is to cultivate a practice of meditation. Now, meditation is a big one, right? It can help. We're going to learn about it in a couple of slides, but it helps us to build some kind of space between the trigger that allows us to give some form of empowered response. And actually, in the treatment centers that I worked in here in Thailand, meditation and mindfulness was a massive component of the whole treatment that was going on, to the point where there was mindfulness classes in the morning, and there were some really, really big benefits and shifts because of incorporating that into some form of recovery plan. And these are just some ideas, guys. You know, step 1, 2, and 3 definitely without fail would need to happen. And there's many forms of recovery, right? It could be a support group such as 12-step. It could be working with a recovery coach. Definitely some form of recovery plan will need to be put in place to combat the behavior. NLP is a really, really effective way or a framework to break the cycle. And this is a wonderful, wonderful quote by Viktor Frankl. And between stimulus and response, there's a space. So some kind of activating event, there is a response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose how we respond to that event. In that response lies our growth and our ultimate freedom from the particular triggering event. So we've got Larry back again. Still feeling pretty stressed about what's going on at work. His stimulus is the stress, or perhaps something that is happening at work is causing him stress. That will lead to him picking up the pint and having a drink. This actually is not a response. By him picking up the drink and having a sip, it's actually a reaction to the trigger that is causing him this discomfort. Just continuing on here, Larry looks a little bit more stress-free and alleviated from any form of suffering. This is how he would utilize NLP to break the cycle. So there still would be that stimulus. That doesn't change, right? It's that event, the situation, the unknown, the unpredictable, or that particular person, place, or thing that is causing him discomfort. If he was to utilize some form of NLP, he would create some space and instead he would respond. And by responding, I mean he could make perhaps an empowered decision based upon what he thought was better for him. If he was in recovery or engaged in some sort of 12-step program, he could go to a recovery meeting. He could reflect on that event and try and take away the learnings from it. He could reframe the event even from a negative to a positive. And remember, every stimulus or every event is neutral. It's just our perception and how we perceive the event, whether it's positive or negative. He could process the particular emotion that's coming up for him because of the stimulus. He could also process the trauma through NLP, such as timeline therapy. He could process the emotion through timeline therapy, and he could work through different interventions such as like to dislike or swish patterns. He could get empowered learnings from the event by reframing the event and looking at what could be good about his boss causing him stress or his work causing him stress. He could finally make peace with that event. And that's a big one. You know, a lot of people that I've worked with in recovery, they're unable to make peace with that event. So even though they have stopped the addictive behavior, there is some form of discomfort that's coming in. By utilizing NLP or some form of intervention, they are able to make peace with that event, and eventually that event is just a feather in the wind. It's no longer disturbs them. Ultimately, this creates liberation in the individual and freedom from the active addictive behavior. So that, in a nutshell, is how someone could use NLP to break the cycle. You know, whether it's someone you know, or maybe perhaps you are suffering from an addictive behavior, NLP is a wonderful, wonderful technique to overcome it. And talking of NLP, this is in about 3 months' time. We will be running our NLP Leadership 4-in-1 certification on the 9th to the 13th of November, live in Bangkok at the Valio Hotel, and co-facilitated by 𝘄𝗵𝗋𝗿𝗏 and Christy Apimonto, two wonderful, wonderful facilitators. You know, I did this training about 2 years ago. And what I experienced from this was, one, I was able to utilize the NLP techniques to help me overcome certain difficulties that I was having. And it was also a way for me to create liberation and some sort of freedom. If you are aspiring to be some kind of coach or therapist, NLP is a wonderful tool has wonderful tools that you can use to help your clients that you serve to overcome addictive behaviors. Just going to the chat box here. Dr. Dinesh, we would appreciate if you would like to come as well. We would love to see you there. So yeah, 5 days, guys, 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. Thai time. Lunch is included, wonderful food as well. It's going to be an awesome event. We typically charge 79,900 Thai baht. That is, you know, compared to Singapore, Australia, or the US, that is fairly cheap compared to those. We have a very special webinar investment for you guys and anyone catching the recording for 50,000 Thai baht for the 5-day training. Moving on. So we kind of talked about it a little bit in the addiction tree. Emotional addiction is actually a thing. Some more chats coming in here, guys. It's an awesome training and experience from Adrian. Adrian's been there, he's done it. And yeah, That's proof in the pudding right there. So emotional addiction, guys, it is one of those symptoms or manifestations of addiction, right? And you can get addicted to emotions. The same way that one would get addicted to substances, what happens, the brain is subconsciously scanning the environment to see where they can get a particular hit of that emotion that they are addicted to. When that emotion hits, dopamine is released the same way that is released when someone engages in a particular addictive behavior. And this alters the nervous system, actually shifts. So let's take anger here, for example. Someone who is addicted to anger will be unconsciously, because of their program, because of some form of suffering that's happened within their life that hasn't been resolved, they will be scanning their environment, looking to see where they can implement their anger into. As soon as they found it and something's triggered them, the anger hits, the dopamine's released, and the nervous system shifts. And, we've all experienced anger here. And, when anger kicks in, there's a certain amount of adrenaline that takes over our body, and that can turn into rage. Once you've experienced that form of high and the emotions hit, the person experiences a come down from the physiological body, from the physiological experience. Once they've experienced that come down, what do you guys think happens next? You can type into the chat box or go back to when you saw that video about Kiwi, the bird, when he experienced a come down. What did he do next? Yeah, they want more, right? Exactly. So the cycle kicks in again. So once they've experienced that come down, they go unconsciously scanning the environment again to see where they can get that emotional hit from. And once you're in that, you are in the addiction cycle again. So guys, well, one of the best ways to overcome emotional addiction, Ian is joining us in Bangkok as well for this, is to come and join Change Your Mind, Create New Results. This program is based on neuroscience, and it is actually from Dr. Joe Dispenza, a wonderful program where you will learn a lot about how the mind operates, the neuroscience behind it, and you'll find ways to create space between any form of stimulus and give an empowered response. I too am also going to be joining this program as well this coming August. I'm really, really looking forward to it. This is facilitated by Luke, Coach Luke, and Luke is actually the only certified provider of this course by Dr. Joe Dispenza in Thailand. Come and check it out. It's going to be an awesome experience. Normal Investment Guys is there, and we have a special webinar investment of 18,000 baht for you guys joining. Some chats coming through. Adrian wants another fix, also an awesome training. And Dr. Dinesh says, sure. Ian, can't wait. And we're really looking forward to welcoming you, Ian, and anyone else that would like to join the training. Guys, actually a pretty quick webinar tonight, 45 minutes. That comes to the end of this webinar. Thanks so much for joining tonight, guys. I hope you got something out of it. I just do want to send a special kind of invite to anyone watching this either live or the recording. Addiction is a sensitive topic. It is difficult to deal with, especially when it's happening to you or someone that you love. If anyone does want to seek any, wants to have a chat about perhaps anything that's going on with them, I invite you to please contact me, and you can contact me by email or by WhatsApp there at the bottom. Everything remains confidential. And, if you wanted to engage in some form of recovery coaching or someone that you did know, please feel free to get in touch. Thank you very much, Ian. I really appreciate your attendance here tonight. Thank you, Adrian. We are a little bit short on, finished a bit early. Does anyone have any questions or comments or anything that you would like to bring up? You can unmute yourself.
Do you want it in the chat? Sorry, Ari, do you want it in the chat? Question.
No, please just unmute and jump in.
Cool. Just with your incredible depth of experience and stuff, this is one of those addictions which goes under the radar, I think. The sugar craving one. You know, people at work, sometimes that I'm coaching, and they get triggered. They have a bad experience or whatever, an ongoing thing every day, and they're reaching for the comfort snack, which is invariably things like chocolate, you know, or cakes or the coffee. But more and more people seem to be heading for the chocolate.
Yeah.
So of course, then there's weight gain and stuff like that. Is there, in your experience, I mean, obviously we're needing to change their habits and make sure it's out of sight and replaced with fresh fruit or something like that. Check their blood sugar levels, maybe with the doctor. Is there anything else you'd recommend for someone?
Sorry, I missed that last
like
part.
Who's in real suffering because of it? Because again, like you said, sorry, yeah. So you know, you can we put in place things like they're keeping the food out of sight. They don't bring it in the first place. They replace it with something healthy. Or they check with the doctor their blood sugar levels, that type of thing. But for them, they know they're doing it and they can't stop, and they know it's, you know, harmful or not rewarding. With your level of experience and depth, what would you recommend as the first step that they should think about to break that habit?
Yeah, excellent question. And sugar is a very common addiction. You know, I think based on the addiction tree is looking at what is actually the root cause of them wanting to engage in taking sugar all the time. There would be some form of trigger that is triggering that reaction to take it, whether, I think you mentioned that with your clients it's predominantly at work. There could be some kind of stress element to it, or something triggering that, and underneath that there would be some kind of division, wounding, or damage within that particular person. So addressing first of all the trigger, and then looking at that root cause. If we go back to that addiction tree, that root of the addiction. And once you've done that, they become aware of it. It would be about creating some form of recovery plan or abstinence program where they could, you know, you don't want them to go into some other addiction, right? But you do want to resolve that underlying trigger and root cause.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Ari. Really helpful.
My pleasure. Cool. Any other questions or comments, guys?
Actually, I have got some friends there in Australia, and so is it possible if they also attend the same?
Sorry, can you repeat that, Dr. Dinesh?
Actually, I have got some friends in Australia and Canada, so they are also clinical psychologists. So would it be convenient and comfortable for you in case they attend the same again?
Yeah, they can come by all means. Absolutely.
So I will definitely invite them, and it was really wonderful. I appreciate that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dinesh. We appreciate you having here, and yeah, by all means, anyone is welcome to get in touch or to come to any of our workshops as well, guys.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. All right, guys. Well, thank you again for joining us, for joining me this evening, and for creating such a nice harmony. And yeah, this recording will be going up on YouTube. So if you are catching the recording, it will be going up tonight. Please feel free to share it amongst your friends, your family. You know, the more people that we can reach, the less stigma happens around addiction, and that false illusion disappears. And there is there is a cure to addiction, right? In the form of recovery, it can be treated. So thank you guys, and hope you all have a wonderful evening wherever you're tuning in from, and look forward to seeing you at one of our trainings again soon. Take care and goodbye. See you later.
Jerry, thanks a lot.
Thank you. If, okay.